So what's an example of control or trying to control someone
Mm,
or some things?
mm,
And when we talk about control, are we talking about someone trying to control someone else or to control like their surroundings?
absolutely. It's interesting because when we break down these behavior traits, they could be occurring anywhere. So when I talk about control, it doesn't mean that if you see someone that's controlling, that it automatically makes them narcissistic.
Right.
There's also a great degree of lack of empathy when it comes to narcissistic behaviors. And
Mhm.
so when I'm working with clients for them to try and figure out what's actually going on, often it's that lack of empathy that really highlights whether it's narcissistic or whether it's coming from some other place. So, in terms of control, as I explain control, know that it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's narcissistic if they're being controlling. But
Mhm.
in a narcissistic version of control, they're usually trying to control everyone else. So it's about controlling other people. It's about
Right.
putting things in place, using manipulation, using emotional manipulation a lot of the time to control others. And this can be very, very diverse. So it could be anything from controlling what someone's wearing and how they appear, to controlling them sexually. So, in narcissistic abuse situations, there's a very, very high incidence of people um, being sexually exploited. And so there's a high element of control when it comes to the sexual side of life with narcissistic personalities. And people often walk away from those relationships saying, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I let myself go down that path or be exploited in that way because I never would have usually. This is not in my nature. And so
Right.
they have a large degree of control over people's behaviors and start to manipulate how they show up in the world.
So let's stay on that example for just a minute. And if someone does find themselves in that situation, how would they get out of that then? Because if they're saying, "Oh, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe that this happened." How is it that they escape that situation?
Mm. Well, it all comes back to the abuse cycle. So usually by the time there's some sort of sexual exploitation happening in a relationship, um, there's been a lot of groundwork already done. So there's usually a lot of emotional abuse that happens prior that basically chips away at that person's self-esteem, but also makes them feel like they're kind of in servitude to that person. So there is, you talked about trauma bonding before, you introduced that phrase trauma bonding. Usually there's a high degree of trauma bonding going on in these situations where the person that's being exploited kind of feels like they don't really have any choice. So the only way out of that is those moments of horror for themselves where they go, I can't believe I just did that, or I can't believe I took part in that or was part of that. And then they usually come to therapy. And it's not normally about the narcissist, it's about how could I let myself do this? And sometimes it may not be sexually, sometimes it's with illegal acts, criminal activity and stuff like that. Here's a person that would never normally do that and finding themselves in that situation because the narcissist has manipulated them into siding with them in that way. Um, and so, in order to get out of that, usually it is these kind of events where the person really has that cognitive dissonance. I know I'm not this person, but I've gone and done this thing or I've participated in this thing that really isn't me. And that cognitive dissonance is so hard and so harsh for them that they usually seek out some kind of help. They might be ringing a helpline or they might be coming to counselling. And then the process from there is rebuilding their self esteem. So, rebuilding that person's self esteem, their sense of self worth, so that they can eventually get themselves out of that situation. But it's a pretty long process. I'm not going to gloss over that. It's not something that most people can just extract themselves from.
Mm.
Occasionally, I hear that where people have been so shocked that they've gone, oh my God, I've just got to get out of here. And that does work for some people. But for most people, they're very entrenched and there's been a lot of emotional abuse leading up to it. So there's a lot of unpacking, unwinding, and unraveling that needs to happen in order for them to extricate themselves from those situations.